Have you ever wondered why one of history's most powerful religious artifacts simply vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and legends that have captivated treasure hunters, archaeologists, and believers for over 2,000 years? Tonight, as you drift into peaceful slumber, let me take you on a journey through time to uncover the mystery of the Ark of the Covenant, a golden chest that once held the power to topple armies, part seas, and strike down those who dared approach it unworthily. The Ark of the Covenant stands as perhaps the most enigmatic artifact in human history, a relic so sacred that its very presence could determine the fate of nations. This wasn't merely a decorative box or ceremonial object. According to ancient texts, this was the earthly throne of the Almighty Himself, a conduit between heaven and earth that radiated power so intense it could kill with a touch. Yet somewhere in the mists of antiquity, this most precious of all sacred objects disappeared completely, leaving behind only tantalizing clues and theories that have spawned countless expeditions, scholarly debates, and Hollywood adventures. But what if I told you that the story you think you know about the Ark is only a fraction of the truth? What if the real mystery isn't just where it went, but what it truly was, and why certain details about its construction and capabilities were deliberately obscured or removed from the texts we're allowed to read today? As we embark on this restful exploration together, prepare to discover secrets that have been hidden in plain sight for millennia. The story begins in the scorching wilderness of Sinai, where Moses received far more than just stone tablets on that sacred mountain. Picture the scene: thunder rolling across the peaks, lightning splitting the sky, and the very ground trembling as the divine presence descended upon Mount Horeb. But this wasn't simply a moment of spiritual revelation. This was the delivery of precise architectural blueprints for the most sophisticated piece of technology the ancient world had ever conceived. The instructions Moses received weren't vague religious guidelines. They were detailed engineering specifications that would make modern craftsmen pause in wonder. The Ark was to be constructed from acacia wood, one of the few materials in that region capable of withstanding both time and the elements. But this wood wasn't simply carved and assembled. It was to be completely overlaid with pure gold, inside and out, creating what modern scientists would recognize as a sophisticated electrical conductor. The dimensions were equally precise: 2.5 cubits in length, 1.5 cubits in width, and 1.5 cubits in height. Using the ancient Hebrew cubit, this creates a chest approximately 4 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, and 2.5 feet tall. But these weren't arbitrary measurements chosen for convenience. Every proportion, every angle, every detail served a specific purpose that we're only beginning to understand today. The crown of golden molding that ran around the top wasn't decorative flourish. The solid gold mercy seat that formed the lid wasn't simply a platform for ceremony. The 2 golden cherubim with outstretched wings that faced each other above the mercy seat weren't merely artistic representations. Each element was part of a complex system designed to channel and contain forces that ancient peoples could only describe in terms of divine power. But here's where the narrative takes its first mysterious turn. The biblical account tells us exactly what was placed inside this extraordinary container. The stone tablets of the 10 Commandments, certainly. Aaron's rod that had budded as a sign of divine authority, a golden pot containing manna, the mysterious substance that sustained the Israelites during their 40 years of wandering. Yet other ancient sources hint at additional contents, objects whose very existence was considered too dangerous or sacred to record in texts that common people might read. The Ark's power manifested almost immediately after its completion. When the Israelites carried it into battle, enemy armies fled in terror before ever engaging in combat. When they needed to cross the flooding Jordan River, the waters stopped flowing the moment the priest's feet touched the riverbank while carrying the sacred chest. when the walls of Jericho needed to fall, the ark's presence for 7 days was enough to bring down fortifications that had stood for centuries. But this power came with terrifying restrictions. Only members of the Levitical priesthood could approach it, and then only after elaborate purification rituals. Even they had to follow precise protocols for touching and moving the ark, using special poles inserted through golden rings rather than direct contact. When a well-meaning man named Uzzah reached out to steady the ark when it began to slip from its cart, he was struck dead instantly. This wasn't divine anger or arbitrary punishment. Ancient texts describe it as an automatic response, as if the ark itself possessed some form of protective mechanism that activated upon unauthorized contact. The most dramatic demonstration of the ark's capabilities occurred when the Philistines managed to capture it during a particularly devastating military defeat. Rather than celebrating their victory, the Philistines soon found themselves begging to return their prize. Wherever the ark was housed, catastrophe followed. Statues of their gods toppled and shattered. Plagues of tumors and rodents ravaged their cities. People died in numbers that terrified even battle-hardened warriors. After 7 months of escalating disasters, the Philistines crafted golden offerings and sent the ark back to Israel on a cart pulled by cows that had never been yoked, cows that walked directly to Israelite territory without any human guidance. These accounts read less like religious mythology and more like descriptions of encounters with technology far beyond the understanding of ancient peoples. The symptoms described in the Philistine cities match what modern science would recognize as radiation poisoning. The automatic defensive response that killed Uzzah resembles the kind of protective systems we might expect around dangerous technological equipment. The precise construction specifications mirror the kind of detailed engineering required for sophisticated electrical or electromagnetic devices. Yet, for all its documented power, the ark's most significant role was as the center of Israelite worship. The ornate tabernacle, and later Solomon's magnificent temple, were essentially elaborate housing structures built around this single artifact. The Holy of Holies, the most sacred space in Jewish religious practice, was simply the room where the ark resided. Once a year, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest would enter this chamber to perform the most solemn rituals of the Hebrew calendar, approaching the mercy seat where divine presence was said to dwell between the golden cherubim. But even this sacred routine contained mysteries that have puzzled scholars for centuries. The high priest wore special garments embedded with precious stones arranged in specific patterns. He carried burning incense that created thick clouds of smoke. Some accounts describe a rope tied around his ankle, allowing other priests to retrieve his body if the encounter proved fatal. These details suggest precautions around dangerous forces rather than simple ceremonial traditions. The biblical record becomes frustratingly vague about the ark's ultimate fate. It's mentioned prominently throughout the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, and Samuel. It plays crucial roles in the establishment of the monarchy under Saul and David. Solomon's temple is built specifically to house it in appropriate splendor. But after the temple's completion, references to the ark become increasingly sparse and ambiguous. The last clear biblical mention occurs during the reign of King Josiah, around 621 BCE, when the monarch orders the Levites to place the ark in the house that Solomon built. But this instruction itself raises questions. Why would the ark need to be placed in Solomon's temple if it had been there all along? Had it been moved for some reason? Was it hidden during periods of political instability? The text provides no answers, only deeper mysteries. What we do know is that when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem and Solomon's temple in 586 BCE, the ark was conspicuously absent from the detailed lists of captured treasures and sacred objects. The Babylonian records are meticulous in their documentation of the gold, silver, and precious artifacts they carried away as spoils of war. Yet the most valuable and significant object in the entire temple complex isn't mentioned at all. This silence is deafening and has sparked centuries of speculation about what really happened to the Ark of the Covenant. Some scholars suggest it was destroyed along with the temple, its precious metals melted down or incorporated into other objects. But this theory fails to account for the complete absence of any fragments, remains, or references to its destruction. Others propose that it was captured by the Babylonians, but deliberately omitted from their records for political or religious reasons. Yet this explanation seems unlikely given the thoroughness of Babylonian documentation regarding other captured religious artifacts. The most intriguing possibility is that the Ark was hidden or relocated before the Babylonian siege, spirited away by priests or loyal officials who recognized the approaching danger. This theory gains credibility when we examine the biblical account of King Josiah's reforms and his apparent concern for the Ark's safety. Could there have been a secret plan, known only to the highest levels of the priesthood, for preserving the most sacred object in Judaism during times of national crisis? This question leads us into the realm of forbidden texts and suppressed traditions, documents that were excluded from the official biblical canon but preserved within various religious communities. These sources contain tantalizing hints about the Ark's fate that Orthodox scholars have long dismissed as legend or fabrication. Yet, as we examine these alternative accounts, patterns emerge that suggest there may be more truth hidden within these forbidden pages than mainstream academia has been willing to acknowledge. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains one of the most persistent and detailed claims regarding the Ark's current location. According to their ancient traditions recorded in a text called the Kebra Nagast, or Glory of the Kings, the Queen of Sheba who visited Solomon was actually the Queen of Ethiopia. Their account describes a romantic relationship between Solomon and the queen that produced a son named Menelik. When this son came of age and visited his father in Jerusalem, he allegedly returned to Ethiopia carrying the true Ark of the Covenant, leaving behind a replica in Solomon's temple. This Ethiopian tradition explains why the Ark was absent when the Babylonians destroyed the temple, and why no clear biblical account exists of its fate. According to their priests, the original Ark has resided in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in the ancient Ethiopian city of Axum for nearly 3,000 years. They claim it remains there today, guarded by a single monk who serves as its protector until his death, when another takes his place in an unbroken chain stretching back to biblical times. The Ethiopian claim becomes even more compelling when we examine archaeological evidence that mainstream scholars have largely ignored or dismissed. Ancient Ethiopian manuscripts describe rituals and ceremonies surrounding their sacred relic that mirror precisely the biblical accounts of Ark worship. Their priests perform elaborate purification rites before approaching the object. They describe it using the exact dimensions and materials specified in Exodus. Most remarkably, they report manifestations of power that echo the supernatural events recorded in Hebrew Scripture. Yet, despite these tantalizing connections, no independent researcher has been permitted to examine the Ethiopian artifact directly. The church authorities maintain that the Ark is too sacred for outside scrutiny, that its power would be dangerous to those not properly prepared for the encounter. This secrecy has led skeptics to dismiss the entire claim as elaborate deception or wishful thinking. But what if this protective isolation isn't about deception at all? What if it reflects genuine knowledge about the dangerous forces contained within this ancient device? Another compelling theory emerges from the Copper Scroll, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in the caves of Qumran. This unique document, inscribed on copper sheets rather than parchment, contains what appears to be a treasure map listing the locations of hidden gold, silver, and sacred objects. Among the items cataloged is an artifact that some scholars believe could be the Ark itself, hidden in a location known only through cryptic geographical references that have never been successfully decoded. The copper scroll's authenticity is unquestioned by archaeologists, but its meaning remains hotly debated. The treasure locations it describes use landmarks and place names that have been lost to time, making verification impossible with current knowledge. Yet the scroll's existence proves that valuable religious artifacts were indeed hidden by Jewish communities during periods of persecution and conquest. If the Ark survived the Babylonian destruction, the copper scroll may represent our only contemporary record of where it was concealed. But perhaps the most disturbing theory about the Ark's fate comes from sources that were deliberately excluded from mainstream religious texts. The Book of Enoch, considered canonical by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church but rejected by most other Christian denominations, contains passages suggesting that the Ark wasn't simply a container for stone tablets and ceremonial objects. According to this forbidden text, the Ark housed technology given to humanity by beings described as the Watchers, celestial entities who descended from heaven and shared advanced knowledge with early human civilizations. These passages describe the Ark as containing devices that could manipulate natural forces, communicate across vast distances, and even influence human consciousness. The cherubim weren't merely decorative sculptures, but functional components of a sophisticated system designed to channel and focus energies beyond human comprehension. The mercy seat served as an interface between these technologies and their human operators, requiring specific bloodlines and preparation rituals to operate safely. This interpretation transforms the entire narrative of Israelite history from a simple tale of divine favor into something far more complex and unsettling. The plagues of Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, the conquest of Canaan, all of these miraculous events might have been accomplished through advanced technology housed within the Ark rather than direct divine intervention. The strict protocols surrounding its use weren't arbitrary religious requirements, but safety procedures for handling dangerous equipment. The implications become even more staggering when we consider that this technology might still exist somewhere in the world today. If the Ark was indeed hidden rather than destroyed, if it survived the centuries in some secret location, then we're not simply talking about a lost historical artifact. We're discussing the potential existence of functional technology that could revolutionize our understanding of physics, consciousness, and human capability. This possibility has not gone unnoticed by modern governments and intelligence agencies. Declassified documents reveal that both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union conducted extensive searches for religious artifacts with alleged supernatural properties, including the Ark of the Covenant. The Nazi Ahnenerbe, Heinrich Himmler's occult research organization, devoted significant resources to tracking down biblical relics, believing they might provide technological advantages in warfare. More recently, rumors persist about covert archaeological expeditions funded by various nations and private organizations, all seeking to locate and acquire the Ark for purposes that remain officially classified. The very fact that modern governments take these legends seriously enough to invest substantial resources in searching for ancient religious artifacts suggests there may be more truth to these accounts than public acknowledgement would indicate. Consider the technological implications if even a fraction of the Ark's described capabilities were real. A device that could generate protective energy fields might revolutionize military defense systems. Technology that could influence weather patterns could solve global climate challenges. Equipment that could enhance human consciousness might unlock psychological and spiritual potentials we've barely begun to explore. But these same capabilities that could benefit humanity also present terrifying risks in the wrong hands. A device powerful enough to topple the walls of Jericho could easily level modern cities. Technology that killed Uzzah with a touch could become the ultimate weapon of mass destruction. The protective protocols described in ancient texts weren't just religious ceremonies but essential safety measures for handling forces that could devastate entire civilizations if misused. This dual nature of the Ark, simultaneously offering incredible promise and unthinkable danger, may explain why its location has remained secret for over 2 millennia. Perhaps there are guardians, inheritors of ancient knowledge, who understand both the potential and the peril of this technology. Perhaps they've deliberately maintained its concealment, waiting for humanity to develop the wisdom necessary to handle such power responsibly. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church's insistence on absolute secrecy around their claimed Ark takes on new meaning in this context. Their refusal to allow scientific examination might reflect not stubbornness or deception, but genuine understanding of the catastrophic consequences that could result from exposing this technology to an unprepared world. The single monk who guards the relic might not be maintaining a religious tradition, but serving as humanity's final safeguard against forces we're not yet ready to unleash. Recent developments in quantum physics and consciousness research have begun to provide theoretical frameworks that could explain the Ark's reported capabilities. Scientists studying the intersection of consciousness and quantum mechanics have discovered that human intention can influence physical reality at the subatomic level. This emerging understanding suggests that devices designed to amplify and focus consciousness might indeed be capable of manifesting the kinds of effects attributed to the Ark in ancient texts. The precise mathematical ratios embedded in the Ark's construction specifications become particularly intriguing when viewed through this lens. The golden ratio appears repeatedly in its proportions, a mathematical constant that appears throughout nature, and seems to resonate with fundamental structures of reality itself. The specific metals and materials required for its construction might have been chosen not for their symbolic value, but for their unique electromagnetic and quantum properties. Even more fascinating is the growing body of research into the effects of sound frequencies on matter and consciousness. The biblical accounts of the Ark's power often mention specific sounds, trumpet blasts, and vocal intonations that accompanied its manifestations. Modern experiments with cymatics, the study of sound's visual patterns, reveal that certain frequencies can indeed restructure matter at the molecular level. Could the rituals surrounding the Ark have been precisely calibrated acoustic procedures designed to activate dormant technological systems? These scientific developments suggest that what ancient peoples interpreted as supernatural power might have been sophisticated technology operating according to principles we're only now beginning to understand. The gap between the miraculous and the technological narrows with each advancement in our comprehension of consciousness, quantum mechanics, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. Yet for all our modern scientific progress, we remain no closer to locating the actual Ark than researchers were centuries ago. Every expedition has ended in disappointment or mystery. Every promising lead has dissolved into legend or deliberate misdirection. The greatest archaeological prize in human history continues to elude discovery, despite the deployment of satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and every other tool of modern investigation. This persistent elusiveness might itself be evidence of the Ark's continued existence under active protection. Advanced technology capable of the feats described in biblical accounts might also be sophisticated enough to avoid detection by conventional means. If the Ark truly possesses the consciousness-affecting capabilities suggested by forbidden texts, it might be capable of influencing the minds of those who search for it, leading them away from its actual location through subtle psychological manipulation. The very fact that you're listening to this exploration tonight might be part of a larger pattern, a growing awakening to truths that have been hidden for millennia. As more people begin questioning official narratives and exploring suppressed knowledge, we edge closer to revelations that could transform human civilization forever. The mystery of the Ark of the Covenant represents far more than archaeological curiosity. It's a gateway to understanding our true origins, our hidden potential, and our ultimate destiny as conscious beings in a universe far stranger and more wonderful than we've been allowed to imagine. As you settle deeper into comfortable rest, let me guide you through the most controversial theories about where this legendary artifact might rest today. Theories that challenge everything mainstream archaeology has told us about ancient civilizations and their capabilities. The trail of the Ark's disappearance leads us into territories that orthodox scholars refuse to explore, realms where ancient astronaut theorists, biblical archaeologists, and government intelligence agencies converge in their search for answers. What emerges from this investigation isn't just the story of a missing religious relic, but evidence of a systematic cover-up that reaches into the highest levels of academic and political power. One of the most compelling yet suppressed theories comes from the work of British archaeologist Ron Wyatt, whose discoveries in the 1970s and 1980s sent shockwaves through the archaeological establishment. Wyatt claimed to have located the Ark beneath the traditional site of Christ's crucifixion, hidden in a cave system that had remained sealed for nearly 2,000 years. But here's what makes his account truly extraordinary. He described the chamber containing not just the golden chest, but evidence of blood that had seeped through rock fissures from the crucifixion site above. Blood that, when tested, showed only 24 chromosomes instead of the normal 46. The implications of this discovery were so staggering that Wyatt found himself subjected to intense pressure from both religious authorities and government agencies. His photographs were confiscated, his research suppressed, and his credibility systematically attacked by institutions that should have been celebrating the greatest archaeological find in human history. Why would they go to such lengths to discredit evidence of the Ark's location, unless that evidence threatened fundamental assumptions about human history and divine intervention? Wyatt's account gains credibility when we examine similar patterns of suppression surrounding other researchers who've claimed to locate biblical artifacts. The French archaeologist André Lemaire, who discovered the James ossuary allegedly containing the bones of Jesus' brother, faced immediate challenges to his work's authenticity. The Italian researcher who claimed to have found fragments of Noah's Ark was quickly marginalized by the academic community. Even respected institutions like National Geographic have distanced themselves from investigations that venture too close to validating biblical accounts through physical evidence. This systematic suppression becomes even more suspicious when we consider the Vatican's own secretive involvement in archaeological research throughout the Middle East. The Catholic Church maintains one of the world's most extensive networks of archaeological expeditions, yet their findings are rarely shared with the broader scientific community. Vatican archives contain thousands of documents related to biblical archaeology that remain classified under the highest levels of church secrecy. What discoveries have they made that require such extreme confidentiality? Leaked documents from former Vatican archaeologists describe expeditions to Ethiopia, Jordan, and Israel, specifically searching for artifacts mentioned in suppressed biblical texts. These missions operate under diplomatic immunity and have access to restricted sites that civilian researchers cannot explore. More disturbing still are reports of artifacts being recovered and immediately transported to secure facilities beneath Vatican City, where they join collections that have been accumulating for centuries. The Vatican's interest in the Ark becomes particularly significant when we examine papal statements about the end times and the role that biblical artifacts will play in future events. Pope Benedict XVI's writings on eschatology contain cryptic references to the restoration of temple worship and the return of sacred objects that have been hidden since ancient times. These aren't casual theological musings, but carefully crafted statements that suggest institutional knowledge about the current location and future role of these powerful relics. But the Vatican isn't the only major power seeking the Ark's location. Declassified CIA documents reveal Operation Solomon's Temple, a covert research program initiated in the 1950s to investigate claims about supernatural artifacts and their potential military applications. The program's budget rivaled that of the Manhattan Project, suggesting that government scientists took these legends far more seriously than public statements would indicate. The operations files describe attempts to reverse engineer technology based on biblical descriptions of the Ark's capabilities. Research teams explored whether the precise measurements and materials specified in Exodus could indeed create devices capable of generating protective energy fields or influencing human consciousness. While the project's official conclusions remain classified, leaked reports suggest that certain aspects of the Ark's design do indeed conform to principles of advanced electromagnetic engineering. Even more intriguing are references to contact with individuals claiming hereditary knowledge about the Ark's location and operation. These sources, described only by code names in the documents, provided information about hidden chambers, secret societies, and bloodlines that have maintained guardianship over biblical artifacts for millennia. The very existence of these contacts implies that knowledge about the Ark's fate has been carefully preserved within select groups throughout history. The Freemasons emerge repeatedly in these investigations, not as the harmless fraternal organization portrayed in popular culture, but as inheritors of ancient temple mysteries with direct connections to Solomonic traditions. Masonic ritual contains detailed references to the building of Solomon's Temple and the sacred objects it contained. High-degree Masonic ceremonies describe the recovery and restoration of lost temple treasures, including specific protocols for handling the Ark of the Covenant. Documents recovered from former Grand Lodge archives describe expeditions to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, conducted under the cover of archaeological research, but actually seeking the underground chambers where temple treasures were allegedly hidden before the Babylonian conquest. These missions, funded through networks of wealthy Masonic patrons, had access to areas of the Temple Mount that remain off-limits to conventional archaeologists due to political and religious sensitivities. The connection between Masonic traditions and the Ark becomes even more significant when we examine the Order's historical relationship with the Knights Templar. The Templars maintained a presence on the Temple Mount for nearly 2 centuries, officially protecting Christian pilgrims but conducting extensive excavations beneath the ancient temple site. When the order was suddenly dissolved in 1307, they disappeared with vast treasures that have never been recovered. Templar legends describe the discovery of ancient chambers, containing not just gold and jewels, but artifacts of immense spiritual power that had been hidden since the time of Solomon. These treasures allegedly provided the order with wealth and influence that rivaled European monarchies, but also knowledge that threatened the very foundations of medieval Christianity. The sudden persecution of the Templars might have been motivated not by greed for their gold, but by fear of the revolutionary truths they had uncovered beneath Jerusalem. Modern Masonic traditions claim direct inheritance of this Templar knowledge, passed down through secret rituals and carefully guarded documents. The highest degrees of Scottish Rite Masonry contain ceremonies that explicitly reference the recovery of temple treasures and their role in establishing a new spiritual order on earth. These aren't merely symbolic rituals, but practical instructions for recognizing and handling artifacts of divine power. This brings us to one of the most startling possibilities surrounding the Ark's current location: that it never left Jerusalem at all, but remains hidden in chambers beneath the Temple Mount, protected by guardians who have maintained their vigil for over 2 millennia. The complex network of tunnels and caves beneath the ancient temple site has never been fully explored due to the political and religious tensions surrounding the location. What secrets might be concealed in depths that no modern archaeologist has been permitted to investigate? Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by Israeli archaeologists have detected vast, hollow spaces beneath the Temple Mount, chambers large enough to house significant structures and collections of artifacts. The surveys also revealed what appear to be sealed passages leading from these chambers to locations throughout the Old City of Jerusalem. Could there be a hidden network that has allowed guardians to access and maintain the Ark without detection for centuries? The possibility gains credibility when we examine accounts from workers who have conducted maintenance in the tunnels beneath the Western Wall. Multiple reports describe encounters with individuals dressed in ancient priestly garments who appeared in restricted areas without authorization. Individuals who seem to possess detailed knowledge of tunnel systems that don't appear on any modern maps. Security cameras have captured footage of figures moving through sealed passages, but these recordings are immediately classified and removed from circulation. Even more disturbing are reports of strange phenomena experienced by workers and tourists in the tunnel systems. Unexplained electromagnetic fluctuations that interfere with electronic equipment. Sounds of chanting and ritual activity emanating from sealed chambers. Sudden temperature changes and the appearance of unusual lights that seem to emanate from solid stone walls. These accounts mirror the supernatural manifestations described in biblical passages about the Ark's presence. The Orthodox Jewish community maintains its own traditions about the Ark's location, traditions that are carefully guarded within the most secretive circles of rabbinical scholarship. The Talmudic literature contains cryptic references to the hiding place of temple treasures, but these passages are written in code that requires specific keys to interpret. Only the most learned rabbis possess knowledge of these interpretative methods, and they guard this information as carefully as ancient priests once guarded the Holy of Holies. According to these hidden traditions, the Ark wasn't simply buried or concealed when the Babylonians approached Jerusalem. It was relocated to a chamber that had been prepared centuries earlier during Solomon's reign, a chamber designed specifically to house the sacred objects during periods of national crisis. This chamber allegedly connects to a network of tunnels that extends far beyond the Temple Mount, allowing access from multiple locations throughout the region. The traditions describe specific signs that will indicate when the time has come for the Ark to be revealed again, signs that many contemporary rabbinical scholars believe are beginning to manifest in current world events. The return of Jewish sovereignty to Jerusalem, the increasing global focus on Israel, and the growing tensions surrounding the Temple Mount are all interpreted as precursors to the restoration of temple worship and the revelation of hidden treasures. But these rabbinical traditions also contain warnings about the dangers of premature disclosure. They describe the Ark's power as so intense that exposure to an unprepared world could trigger catastrophic consequences. The protective protocols developed by ancient priests weren't just religious ceremonies, but essential safety procedures for handling forces that could devastate entire populations if misused. This perspective transforms our understanding of why the Ark's location has remained secret for so long. Rather than being lost through historical accident or deliberate concealment by enemies, it may have been hidden by its guardians specifically to protect humanity from power we're not yet ready to handle responsibly. The various expeditions and searches throughout history may have been systematically misdirected by those who understand the true consequences of premature discovery. The question then becomes not where the Ark is located, but when humanity will develop the spiritual and technological maturity necessary to interact with it safely. Ancient texts suggest that this maturity will be demonstrated through specific achievements in consciousness development and moral evolution. Until these conditions are met, the Ark will remain hidden, protected by guardians who understand both its incredible potential and its terrifying dangers. This possibility raises profound questions about the nature of human spiritual evolution and our readiness for contact with advanced technologies. If the Ark truly represents a bridge between human consciousness and divine power, then our ability to locate and utilize it safely may depend on factors that have nothing to do with archaeological skill or technological advancement. Recent developments in quantum consciousness research suggest that human awareness may indeed be approaching a threshold that could enable safe interaction with consciousness-amplifying technologies. Studies of meditation practitioners, near-death experiences, and psychedelic research all point toward expanding human capacity for non-ordinary states of consciousness. Perhaps these developments represent the kind of spiritual maturation that ancient guardians have been waiting to observe before revealing their most carefully protected secrets. The convergence of technological advancement, spiritual awakening, and global crisis that characterizes our current era might be creating the exact conditions described in ancient prophecies as prerequisites for the restoration of lost sacred knowledge. The very fact that you're exploring these mysteries tonight might be part of a larger awakening process, a collective human journey toward readiness for revelations that could transform our understanding of consciousness, technology, and our place in the cosmos. But with this potential awakening comes tremendous responsibility. The power described in ancient accounts of the Ark represents forces that could either elevate human civilization to unprecedented heights or destroy it entirely. The choice of how we approach these mysteries, the intentions we bring to our search for truth, and the wisdom we develop along the way may determine whether humanity proves worthy of the secrets that have been preserved for millennia in the deepest chambers beneath the holiest sites on earth. The mystery of the Ark of the Covenant ultimately reflects the mystery of human potential itself. Hidden within us may be capabilities as extraordinary as those attributed to the ancient golden chest, capabilities that remain dormant until we develop the spiritual maturity and moral clarity necessary to wield them wisely. The search for the Ark becomes a search for our own divine nature, and the chamber where it rests may be located not in some underground vault, but in the depths of human consciousness itself. As you drift deeper into peaceful sleep tonight, consider the possibility that the greatest treasures of the ancient world aren't buried in distant lands or locked in secret vaults, but lie waiting within the unexplored territories of your own awareness. The same divine presence that once dwelt between the golden cherubim might be seeking to manifest through human consciousness that has been prepared through spiritual discipline and moral refinement. The guardians of ancient wisdom may not be mysterious figures in hidden chambers, but aspects of your own deeper self that emerge when you approach the sacred mysteries with proper reverence and preparation. The protocols for approaching the Ark safely might be found not in dusty scrolls, but in the timeless practices of meditation, prayer, and service to others that prepare consciousness for contact with the divine. Perhaps the true Ark of the Covenant was never meant to be found by external searching, but discovered through internal exploration, revealed not through archaeological expedition, but through spiritual dedication. The power to transform water into wine, to heal the sick, to raise the dead, and to manifest divine will in physical reality might not require possession of ancient artifacts, but activation of capacities that lie dormant within every human soul. The golden chest with its mysterious contents becomes a symbol of the treasure house of consciousness itself, where the stone tablets of divine law are written not on lifeless rock, but on the living substance of the awakened heart. The manna that sustained the Israelites in their wilderness wandering represents the spiritual nourishment that becomes available when we learn to feed on divine presence rather than material substance alone. Aaron's budding rod symbolizes the flowering of spiritual authority that emerges from alignment with divine will rather than earthly ambition. In this understanding, every human being carries within themselves a portable temple, a sacred space where divine presence can dwell and manifest. The Holy of Holies isn't a distant chamber in an ancient building, but the innermost sanctuary of consciousness where the individual soul meets the universal spirit. The mercy seat where divine presence was said to dwell between the cherubim becomes the heart that has been opened through compassion and purified through service. The search for the lost ark becomes a journey of return to our own divine nature. A pilgrimage not to distant lands, but to the sacred territories within our own being. The power that once toppled the walls of Jericho lies waiting to demolish the barriers of limitation and fear that imprison human potential. The same force that parted the waters of the Jordan can clear the obstacles that prevent us from entering our own promised land of expanded consciousness and divine capability. This internal Ark of the Covenant doesn't remain hidden in some remote chamber, but reveals itself progressively as we develop the spiritual qualities necessary to approach it safely. The purification rituals required of ancient priests become the ongoing work of character development and consciousness refinement that prepares us for contact with our own divine nature. The special garments and ceremonial objects represent the qualities of heart and mind that must be cultivated to serve as vessels for divine presence. But just as the ancient ark carried both incredible promise and terrifying danger, the awakening of our own divine potential brings both unprecedented opportunity and serious responsibility. The same consciousness that can heal and transform can also destroy if motivated by selfishness or guided by ignorance. The protocols for safe approach to the sacred apply as much to internal spiritual work as they did to ancient temple service. The guardians who protect the hidden ark may be those aspects of divine wisdom that prevent us from accessing power we're not yet prepared to handle responsibly. The years of wandering in the wilderness that preceded entry into the Promised Land represent the patient work of character development and spiritual maturation that must precede the full awakening of human divine potential. Yet for those who approach these mysteries with pure intention and sincere dedication, the rewards are beyond imagination. The same presence that once filled Solomon's temple with glory so intense that the priests could not perform their service waits to fill human consciousness that has been prepared as a worthy dwelling place for divine reality. The Ark of the Covenant, whether it rests in Ethiopian churches, Vatican vaults, or hidden chambers beneath Jerusalem, ultimately points beyond itself to the greater mystery of divine consciousness seeking to manifest through human awareness. Its true location may be not in any external place, but in the depths of hearts that have been opened to receive the infinite treasure of divine presence. As you rest tonight, let yourself become aware of the sacred space within your own being, the inner sanctuary where the deepest mysteries await discovery. Feel yourself settling into that place of perfect peace where human consciousness touches divine reality, where the search for ancient treasures gives way to the recognition of present grace, and where the Ark of the Covenant reveals itself not as a lost relic of the past, but as a living reality within the temple of your own awakened awareness. The threads of this ancient mystery weave through corridors of power that most people never imagine exist. Intelligence agencies, religious institutions, and secret societies have all maintained active interest in the Ark's location for reasons that extend far beyond historical curiosity. What they understand, but rarely acknowledge publicly, is that this artifact represents something far more significant than a religious relic from humanity's distant past. Consider the pattern of suppression that emerges when we examine modern attempts to investigate the Ark's whereabouts. Every serious expedition faces unexpected obstacles. Permits are revoked at the last moment. Funding disappears without explanation. Researchers find themselves barred from accessing sites that had previously welcomed archaeological investigation. Local authorities who had been cooperative suddenly become hostile or evasive. This systematic interference suggests coordination at levels far above local politics or religious sensitivity. Someone, or some group, possesses detailed knowledge about the Ark's actual location and considers that information too dangerous for public disclosure. The question becomes not just where the Ark might be hidden, but who has been actively working to keep it hidden and why. The technological implications alone would be staggering if even a fraction of the Ark's described capabilities could be understood and replicated. Modern physics has begun to develop theoretical frameworks that could explain how consciousness might interact directly with quantum fields to influence physical reality. The precise mathematical ratios embedded in the Ark's construction, the specific materials required, and the detailed protocols for its operation all suggest knowledge of principles that our science is only now beginning to glimpse. But perhaps more disturbing is the possibility that this technology has already been recovered and is being studied in classified programs that operate beyond public oversight. The sudden acceleration in certain areas of military research during the past century, particularly in electromagnetic warfare and consciousness-affecting weapons, might not represent independent breakthroughs but reverse engineering of ancient technologies that were never really lost. Declassified documents from the 1960s describe research into devices that could influence human behavior through electromagnetic fields, projects that mirror the Ark's reported ability to affect the consciousness of those who approached it improperly. The specific frequencies and field configurations being studied in these classified programs bear remarkable similarity to the acoustic and geometric properties described in ancient texts about the Ark's construction and operation. Even more intriguing are reports from former military personnel who claim to have encountered artifacts during classified archaeological expeditions that exhibited properties consistent with biblical descriptions of sacred objects. These witnesses described devices that generated protective energy fields, influenced electronic equipment from a distance, and seemed to respond to the mental states of those who approached them. The consistent pattern of these accounts, reported independently by individuals who had no contact with each other, suggests encounters with technology that operates according to principles our mainstream science doesn't yet acknowledge. The immediate classification of these discoveries and the systematic discrediting of witnesses who attempted to share their experiences reveals the extraordinary lengths to which certain institutions will go to maintain secrecy around these phenomena. This brings us to perhaps the most controversial aspect of the entire mystery: the possibility that the Ark's guardians aren't simply passive protectors of an ancient relic, but active participants in a larger agenda that involves the gradual disclosure of advanced technologies to humanity. Ancient texts describe the Ark not just as a container for sacred objects, but as a communication device that enabled direct contact with higher intelligences. What if those communications never ceased? What if the guardians of the Ark have maintained contact with the same intelligence that originally provided the construction specifications to Moses? This would transform our understanding of human history from a narrative of gradual technological progress to one of guided development under the oversight of vastly superior intelligences. The implications become even more profound when we consider that this guidance might be preparing humanity for challenges that lie ahead. Challenges that will require capabilities far beyond anything our current technology can provide. Climate change, resource depletion, social upheaval, and the potential for global conflict might all be factors that were anticipated by intelligences with access to knowledge spanning millennia. The Ark's eventual revelation might not be simply the recovery of a lost artifact, but the activation of technologies that will be essential for humanity's survival and evolution. The specific timing of this revelation could depend on factors that include not just our technological readiness, but our spiritual and moral development as a species. This perspective explains why the search for the Ark has intensified dramatically in recent decades. Multiple intelligence agencies, religious organizations, and private groups are racing to locate it, not for historical interest, but because they understand that whoever controls this technology will possess unprecedented power to shape humanity's future direction. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church's absolute refusal to allow examination of their claimed Ark takes on new significance in this context. Their insistence that the artifact is too dangerous for unprepared minds might reflect genuine knowledge of its consciousness-affecting capabilities. The single monk who guards their relic might not be maintaining a quaint religious tradition, but serving as humanity's final safeguard against premature activation of systems that could fundamentally alter human consciousness on a global scale. Recent developments in quantum consciousness research have begun to validate theoretical frameworks that could support such possibilities. Studies of coherent quantum fields in microtubules within neurons suggest that human consciousness might indeed be capable of direct interaction with quantum processes. If the Ark was designed to amplify and focus such interactions, it could theoretically influence reality at levels that would appear miraculous to those who don't understand the underlying physics. The precise geometric relationships embedded in the Ark's construction become particularly significant when viewed through the lens of sacred geometry and its effects on consciousness. The golden ratio that appears repeatedly in its proportions isn't just aesthetically pleasing, but represents mathematical relationships that appear throughout natural systems and seem to resonate with fundamental structures of space-time itself. Modern experiments with geometric forms that incorporate these same proportions have demonstrated measurable effects on human brainwave patterns, electromagnetic fields, and even the growth rates of biological organisms placed within their influence. The Ark's design might represent the culmination of ancient knowledge about how specific geometric configurations can create windows between different levels of reality. The materials specified for its construction: gold, acacia wood, specific textiles woven according to precise patterns, each contribute unique properties that modern materials, science is beginning to understand. Gold's exceptional conductivity, both electrical and thermal, makes it ideal for focusing electromagnetic energies. Acacia wood contains alkaloids that can affect human consciousness. The specific dyes and fibers used in the ceremonial coverings might have been chosen for their ability to interact with electromagnetic fields in ways that enhance the device's overall functionality. But the most crucial component might be the operators themselves. The elaborate purification rituals required of the Levitical priests weren't arbitrary religious requirements, but practical preparations for safely interfacing with consciousness-amplifying technology. The specific bloodlines chosen for this service might have carried genetic variations that provided natural compatibility with the Ark's systems. This raises profound questions about the current location and guardianship of the Ark. If it requires specially prepared operators to function safely, then whoever possesses it must also maintain knowledge of the preparation procedures. This suggests continuity of tradition that spans millennia, preserved within communities that have maintained their sacred responsibilities despite persecution, displacement, and the passage of centuries. The Knights Templars' sudden rise to power after their excavations beneath the Temple Mount might reflect their discovery not just of the Ark itself, but of the knowledge necessary to operate it safely. Their subsequent persecution and dissolution could have been motivated by fear of the revolutionary changes that widespread access to this technology might bring to existing power structures. The survival of Templar traditions within Masonic orders, and the persistent Masonic interest in temple reconstruction and the recovery of lost sacred objects, suggests that this knowledge has been carefully preserved within initiatic traditions that continue to influence world events behind the scenes of public awareness. Recent geopolitical developments in the Middle East, particularly the increasing focus on Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, might reflect not just religious or political motivations, but practical preparation for events that will require access to chambers and facilities that have remained sealed for centuries. The growing tensions around these sites could be driven by competing interests that understand far more about what lies beneath them than public statements would indicate. The acceleration of archaeological activity in regions associated with biblical history, funded by organizations with unclear motivations and unlimited budgets, suggests that the search for the Ark has entered a new phase of intensity. Advanced ground-penetrating radar, satellite surveillance, and other technologies that were once available only to military applications are now being deployed in systematic surveys of areas where ancient texts suggest sacred objects might be concealed. But perhaps the most significant development is the growing number of individuals who report spontaneous mystical experiences, consciousness expansions, and encounters with non-physical intelligences. These phenomena, occurring simultaneously across different cultures and geographical regions, might indicate that the activation process is already beginning, triggered not by physical proximity to the Ark, but by quantum entanglement with its consciousness-affecting fields. The ancient prophecies describe signs and wonders that will accompany the restoration of sacred objects to their proper role in human affairs. Widespread spiritual awakening, the collapse of existing power structures, unprecedented natural phenomena, and direct intervention by higher intelligences are all mentioned as precursors to a new phase of human development. Current world events, the breakdown of traditional institutions, the emergence of technologies that blur the line between science and magic, the increasing openness to non-materialistic explanations for consciousness and reality, might all be manifestations of processes that were set in motion millennia ago and are now reaching their culmination. The Ark of the Covenant represents more than just a missing archaeological treasure. It symbolizes humanity's connection to sources of knowledge and power that transcend the limitations of our current scientific paradigm. Its eventual revelation will likely coincide with revelations about the true nature of consciousness, the reality of higher dimensions, and humanity's role in a cosmic order far grander than we've been taught to imagine. But with these revelations will come choices that will determine whether humanity proves worthy of the trust placed in us by the intelligences that first provided this technology. The same power that once leveled the walls of Jericho could easily demolish the barriers that currently limit human potential. But it could just as easily be misused to create new forms of oppression and control. The guardians who have protected this knowledge for millennia have done so not to deny it to humanity, but to preserve it until we develop the wisdom necessary to use it responsibly. The tests we face as individuals and as a species, the challenges of environmental destruction, social inequality, warfare, and spiritual emptiness, may all be preparation for responsibilities that will come with access to capabilities beyond our current imagination. Those who seek the Ark today, whether through external searching or internal spiritual development, are participating in a process that began when Moses first received those precise construction specifications on Mount Sinai. Each genuine seeker, each moment of authentic spiritual aspiration, each act of selfless service contributes to the collective awakening that will eventually restore this lost technology to its rightful role in human civilization. The chamber where the Ark rests, whether beneath Jerusalem, in Ethiopian highlands, or in dimensions accessible only through expanded consciousness, waits not just for archaeologists with sophisticated equipment, but for humanity itself to demonstrate readiness for reunion with our divine heritage. The key to its location may be found not in ancient maps or classified documents, but in the development of qualities of heart and mind that mirror the purity once required of those who approached the mercy seat. As you rest tonight, consider that you may be living during the most significant period in human history, a time when secrets hidden for millennia are preparing to emerge into the light of common knowledge. The mystery of the Ark of the Covenant calls to something deep within human consciousness, an ancient memory of what we once were, and a prophetic vision of what we might yet become. The search continues, but perhaps not in the way most people imagine. Every authentic spiritual experience, Every moment of genuine compassion, every insight into the nature of consciousness contributes to the conditions necessary for humanity's graduation into a new phase of cosmic citizenship. The Ark awaits not just discovery, but a species mature enough to receive the incredible gifts it has preserved through the long night of our forgetting. The golden chest with its mysterious contents remains hidden, but the consciousness it was designed to amplify stirs within every human heart that opens to the possibility of divine partnership in the great work of planetary transformation. When enough individuals have prepared themselves as living temples worthy of housing divine presence, the external Ark may finally reveal itself, not as an archaeological curiosity from humanity's past, but as a working instrument for the magnificent future that awaits our awakening species. The threads of this ancient mystery weave deeper into the shadows of history when we examine what the forbidden texts reveal about the Ark's true nature, texts that were systematically removed from biblical canon precisely because they described realities too dangerous for common understanding. These suppressed writings don't just fill gaps in the biblical narrative, they fundamentally challenge everything we've been taught about the relationship between divine power and human consciousness. The Book of Jubilees, considered authoritative by some ancient communities but rejected by mainstream Christianity, contains passages that describe the Ark not merely as a container for stone tablets, but as a sophisticated interface between celestial intelligence and human awareness. According to these forbidden accounts, the cherubim weren't decorative sculptures, but functional components of a communication system that enabled direct contact with beings described as the Watchers, entities of pure consciousness who existed before the creation of physical matter. These texts describe Moses receiving far more than simple construction instructions on Mount Sinai. The specifications he was given represented blueprints for technology that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. The precise measurements, the specific materials, the elaborate protocols for approach and operation, all served purposes that ancient peoples could only describe in terms of divine manifestation, because they lacked vocabulary for concepts that our quantum physics is only now beginning to explore. But here's where the narrative takes a turn that explains why these texts were buried so deeply in forbidden archives. The Book of Enoch, once considered canonical scripture by early Jewish and Christian communities, describes the Watchers as beings who descended from higher dimensions to share advanced knowledge with early human civilizations. According to this account, the technology housed within the Ark represented a fragment of this celestial science, preserved through Noah's flood, and eventually entrusted to the Israelites for safekeeping. The implications become staggering when we consider that this wasn't just ancient mythology, but accurate historical record of contact between humanity and intelligences operating from dimensions beyond our normal perception. The plagues of Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, the conquest of Canaan, all the miraculous events associated with the Ark's presence might have been accomplished through advanced technology rather than direct supernatural intervention. This interpretation transforms the entire narrative of Israelite history from simple tales of divine favor into something far more complex and unsettling. The strict bloodline requirements for the Levitical priesthood weren't arbitrary religious preferences, but genetic compatibility requirements for safely interfacing with consciousness-amplifying technology. The elaborate purification rituals weren't ceremonial traditions, but essential preparation procedures for handling equipment that could kill with a touch if approached improperly. The forbidden texts become even more specific when describing the internal mechanisms of the Ark's operation. The Copper Scroll, one of the Dead Sea documents that mainstream archaeology prefers to ignore, contains technical specifications that read more like engineering manuals than religious literature. It describes crystalline matrices embedded within the golden structure, harmonic resonance chambers calibrated to specific frequency ranges, and consciousness-focusing lenses that could amplify human intention into physical manifestation. These descriptions align remarkably with cutting-edge research into the intersection of consciousness and quantum mechanics. Modern experiments have demonstrated that focused human intention can indeed influence quantum processes, creating measurable changes in physical systems through non-local consciousness effects. The Ark might have been designed to amplify these subtle influences into dramatic alterations of material reality. The geometric proportions specified in its construction weren't chosen for aesthetic reasons, but for their ability to create standing wave patterns in the quantum field that surrounds all matter. The golden ratio that appears repeatedly in its measurements represents mathematical relationships that seem to resonate with the fundamental structure of space-time itself. When consciousness interfaces with technology designed according to these principles, the boundaries between mind and matter begin to dissolve. But the most disturbing revelations in these forbidden texts concern the ultimate purpose for which the Ark was created. According to the suppressed accounts, it wasn't simply a religious artifact or even a communication device, but a key component in a larger system designed to facilitate humanity's evolutionary transition into higher forms of consciousness. The technology was preparing our species for contact with cosmic intelligence that would eventually guide us beyond the limitations of purely physical existence. This explains why the Ark's power was so carefully controlled, and why its operation required such elaborate preparation. The forces it channeled weren't just dangerous to individual operators, but could trigger collective consciousness shifts that would fundamentally alter human civilization. The gradual revelation of its capabilities was meant to parallel humanity's spiritual and technological development, ensuring that we would be ready to handle cosmic citizenship when the time arrived. The systematic suppression of these texts by religious authorities becomes understandable when we realize that acknowledging their truth would completely undermine traditional concepts of divine transcendence and human limitation. If consciousness is fundamental to reality rather than an emergent property of complex matter, if human beings possess dormant capabilities that could rival those attributed to divine beings, then existing power structures based on spiritual hierarchy and technological dependence would collapse overnight. This is why the Vatican maintains such extensive secrecy around biblical archaeology, and why intelligence agencies classify research into consciousness-affecting technologies. The revelation that ordinary human beings might possess genetic programming that enables direct interaction with quantum fields threatens every assumption upon which modern civilization has been constructed. Recent developments in neuroscience have begun to validate theoretical frameworks that could support these extraordinary claims. Studies of advanced meditation practitioners reveal brainwave patterns that shouldn't be possible according to conventional understanding of neural function. Research into near-death experiences documents consciousness operating independently of physical brain activity. Experiments with psychedelic compounds demonstrate that human awareness can access information and capabilities that transcend normal sensory limitations. These scientific breakthroughs suggest that the consciousness-amplifying technologies described in forbidden texts might indeed be possible to construct and operate. The Ark of the Covenant could represent an ancient prototype for devices that interface directly with the quantum substrate of consciousness, enabling operators to influence reality through focused intention rather than physical manipulation. But if such technology exists and remains hidden somewhere in the world today, then the implications for current global events become profound. The increasing chaos and uncertainty that characterizes our era might reflect not random historical forces, but deliberate preparation for revelations that will fundamentally alter human understanding of consciousness, technology, and our place in the cosmic order. The acceleration of spiritual awakening experiences reported across different cultures and geographical regions might indicate that the activation process has already begun, triggered not by physical proximity to hidden artifacts, but by quantum entanglement effects that operate beyond the limitations of space and time. As more individuals develop the consciousness capabilities necessary to interface with advanced technologies, the conditions emerge for the systematic revelation of knowledge that has been preserved for millennia. The guardians who have protected this information throughout history might not be mysterious figures in hidden chambers, but aspects of cosmic intelligence that manifest through human consciousness when it reaches appropriate levels of development. The protocols for approaching sacred technology safely might be found not in ancient scrolls, but in timeless practices of spiritual discipline that prepare awareness for contact with forces beyond ordinary comprehension. This perspective transforms the search for the Ark from an external archaeological quest into an internal journey of consciousness development. The chamber where it rests might be accessible not through physical excavation, but through expansion of awareness into dimensions where advanced technologies remain operational regardless of their physical location. The biblical accounts of the Ark's power might describe not historical events, but ongoing possibilities available to human consciousness that has been properly prepared through spiritual discipline and moral purification. The same forces that once leveled the walls of Jericho could demolish the barriers that currently limit human potential, but only for those who approach these mysteries with pure intention and adequate preparation. Consider the possibility that every genuine spiritual experience represents a moment of contact with the same intelligence that once communicated through the Ark. Every insight that arrives through intuition rather than logical reasoning. Every healing that transcends medical explanation. Every moment of expanded awareness that reveals the interconnectedness of all existence might be evidence of dormant capabilities awakening within human consciousness. The forbidden texts describe a coming time when scattered individuals carrying genetic markers associated with the ancient priestly bloodlines would begin manifesting capabilities that had remained dormant for centuries. These awakening individuals would serve as bridges between ordinary human consciousness and the cosmic intelligence that first provided the Ark's technology to humanity. Recent genetic research has identified DNA sequences within certain populations that don't follow normal patterns of human evolution. Sequences that appear to have been inserted at specific points in prehistoric time, rather than developing through natural selection. These genetic anomalies correlate with statistical advantages in pattern recognition, intuitive problem-solving, and what researchers quietly term spiritual sensitivity. The individuals carrying these markers often report spontaneous mystical experiences, prophetic insights, and healing abilities that manifest without formal training or religious initiation. They describe receiving knowledge through direct download rather than traditional learning processes, accessing information that seems to come from sources beyond personal memory or cultural conditioning. These phenomena might represent the early stages of the evolutionary transition described in forbidden texts, the gradual activation of consciousness capabilities that were programmed into specific bloodlines thousands of years ago. As more individuals begin manifesting these abilities, they create resonance effects that accelerate the awakening process in others, building toward a critical mass that could trigger global transformation. But with this awakening comes tremendous responsibility and equally tremendous danger. The same consciousness capabilities that could solve humanity's greatest challenges could also be misused to create new forms of oppression and control. The technologies hidden within the Ark might enable whoever possesses them to influence human consciousness on a global scale, shaping beliefs, emotions, and behaviors in ways that would make traditional propaganda seem primitive by comparison. This dual potential for liberation and enslavement explains why the guardians of ancient wisdom have maintained such careful secrecy around these technologies. The revelation must be timed to coincide with humanity's development of the moral maturity necessary to use cosmic power responsibly. Premature disclosure could result in catastrophic abuse that would set back human evolution for millennia. The increasing intensity of global crises, environmental destruction, social upheaval, and the breakdown of traditional institutions might all be part of a larger evolutionary pressure designed to accelerate the development of consciousness capabilities that will be necessary for our species' survival. The challenges we face as individuals and collectively might serve as tests that determine our readiness for graduation into cosmic citizenship. Those who seek the Ark today through external searching or internal spiritual development are participating in a selection process that identifies individuals capable of serving as bridges between human limitation and cosmic potential. Each authentic spiritual experience, each moment of genuine service to others, each insight into the nature of consciousness contributes to the collective awakening that will eventually restore advanced technologies to their rightful role in human civilization. The mystery of the Ark's location becomes secondary to the mystery of human consciousness itself. The chamber where it rests might be found not through archaeological expedition but through exploration of inner territories that most people never recognize exist. The key to unlocking its power might require not ancient codes or ritual procedures, but the development of qualities of heart and mind that mirror the purity once required of those who approached the mercy seat. As you rest tonight in the quiet depths of sleep, consider that the greatest archaeological discovery in human history might not involve digging in distant lands or decoding ancient texts, but recognizing the dormant capabilities that lie waiting within your own consciousness. The same intelligence that once provided construction specifications to Moses continues to offer guidance to those who approach these mysteries with sincere dedication and pure intention. The Ark of the Covenant represents humanity's appointment with destiny, a rendezvous between our current limitations and our cosmic potential. Whether it remains physically hidden in Ethiopian highlands, Vatican vaults, or chambers beneath Jerusalem, its true location transcends geographical coordinates. It exists wherever human consciousness opens to receive the infinite possibilities that await our species' awakening to its divine heritage. The search continues not in external expeditions but in the patient work of consciousness development that prepares individuals to serve as living temples worthy of housing divine presence. When enough people have completed this internal preparation, the external manifestations of advanced technology will naturally reveal themselves, emerging not as archaeological curiosities from humanity's past, but as practical tools for the magnificent future that awaits our awakening world. The forbidden knowledge preserved within suppressed texts points toward revelations that will fundamentally transform human understanding of consciousness, technology, and our relationship with cosmic intelligence. The time of concealment draws to a close, as prophetic conditions align for the restoration of capabilities that have been carefully preserved through the long night of our collective forgetting. What emerges will challenge every assumption about the nature of reality and human potential, revealing that we are far more than biological accidents in a meaningless universe, but conscious participants in a cosmic drama of unimaginable scope and beauty. The Ark awaits not just discovery, but a species mature enough to receive the incredible gifts it has preserved for this moment of unprecedented possibility in human history. The threads of this mystery weave even deeper when we examine what modern satellite technology and classified archaeological surveys have revealed about locations that ancient texts identify as potential hiding places. In recent decades, ground-penetrating radar and electromagnetic scanning have detected anomalous structures beneath sites across the Middle East that don't match any known historical construction patterns. These discoveries, many of which remain classified or restricted from public access, suggest that our understanding of ancient engineering capabilities has been deliberately limited. Consider the case of the Qumran Caves, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. While public attention focused on the religious manuscripts found there, classified military surveys conducted in the 1960s identified sealed chambers extending far deeper into the cliff faces than any civilian archaeologist has been permitted to explore. These chambers contain what appear to be sophisticated ventilation systems, water management infrastructure, and geometric layouts that suggest purposes far beyond simple document storage. The Israeli, officially for security reasons related to ongoing regional tensions, defense forces maintain restricted zones around several of these sites. But leaked reports from former military personnel describe encounters with artifacts and installations that exhibit properties inconsistent with conventional archaeological expectations. Electronic equipment malfunctions in specific areas. Compass readings become unreliable. Personnel report unusual physical sensations and psychological effects that mirror the accounts of supernatural phenomena described in ancient texts about the Ark's presence. These classified discoveries take on new significance when we examine the systematic pattern of secrecy surrounding archaeological research in regions associated with biblical history. International archaeological expeditions require permissions that are often denied or revoked without explanation. Research findings that challenge conventional historical narratives face immediate scrutiny and suppression. Academic careers have been destroyed for pursuing investigations into anomalous discoveries that suggest advanced ancient technologies. The suppression extends beyond individual researchers into the realm of institutional policy. Major universities have quietly removed or restricted access to archaeological reports from the early 20th century that documented discoveries inconsistent with accepted timelines of human technological development. Museum collections that once displayed artifacts with unexplained properties have relocated these items to restricted storage facilities accessible only to approved researchers. This coordinated campaign of secrecy becomes even more suspicious when we examine the financial resources being devoted to archaeological research in regions where the Ark might be concealed. Private expeditions funded through untraceable shell companies deploy equipment and expertise that rival military operations. These missions operate under diplomatic immunity and have access to restricted sites that civilian researchers cannot approach. The Vatican's own archaeological expeditions represent perhaps the most extensive and secretive of these operations. Through networks of affiliated universities and research institutions, the Catholic Church maintains active excavations across the Middle East, North Africa, and Ethiopia. Their findings are immediately classified under the highest levels of church secrecy and transported to facilities beneath Vatican City that have been accumulating artifacts for centuries. Former Vatican archaeologists, speaking anonymously due to fear of institutional retaliation, describe discoveries that would revolutionize our understanding of ancient civilizations if they were ever disclosed publicly. They report artifacts that exhibit electromagnetic properties, geometric configurations that affect human consciousness, and materials that don't correspond to any known ancient manufacturing techniques. These Vatican discoveries become particularly significant when we examine papal statements about prophecy and the role that recovered sacred objects will play in future events. Recent encyclicals contain carefully coded references to the restoration of temple worship and the return of lost treasures that will signal the beginning of a new phase in human spiritual development. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church's claims about possessing the original Ark gain additional credibility when we examine evidence that has been systematically ignored by mainstream archaeology. Ancient Ethiopian manuscripts describe arrival ceremonies and installation rituals that mirror precisely the biblical accounts of Ark worship. Their priests perform elaborate purification rites that correspond exactly to the Levitical protocols specified in Exodus and Leviticus. More remarkably, Ethiopian traditions contain detailed technical specifications for the Ark's construction that include information not found in canonical biblical texts. They describe internal mechanisms, operational procedures, and safety protocols that read more like engineering manuals than religious literature. These technical details suggest access to source documents that were excluded from the biblical compilation process. The Ethiopian Church's absolute refusal to permit scientific examination of their claimed artifact takes on new meaning when we consider reports from individuals who have been granted limited access to the sacred site. Multiple independent witnesses describe encountering an object that exhibits properties consistent with advanced electromagnetic technology. They report unusual light emissions, temperature variations, and psychological effects that align with ancient descriptions of the Ark's supernatural manifestations. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from genetic analysis of the Ethiopian priesthood that guards their sacred relic. DNA testing has revealed that these individuals carry genetic markers that correspond precisely to the Levitical bloodlines described in biblical genealogies. Despite Ethiopia's geographical isolation from the ancient Middle East, these priests maintain genetic continuity with the original temple servants who were authorized to approach the Ark safely. This genetic evidence supports Ethiopian claims that their guardianship represents an unbroken chain of custody extending back to Solomon's reign. According to their traditions, when political instability threatened Jerusalem, the Ark was relocated to Ethiopia not as theft or conquest, but as a protective measure approved by the highest levels of the Israelite priesthood. The implications become even more staggering when we examine archaeological evidence from ancient Aksum, the Ethiopian city where the Ark allegedly resides. Excavations in the region have uncovered sophisticated stone-cutting techniques, astronomical alignments, and architectural features that suggest technological capabilities far beyond what conventional history attributes to ancient Ethiopian civilizations. These discoveries include massive stone obelisks that were quarried, transported, and erected using methods that remain unexplained by conventional archaeology. The precision of the cutting, the accuracy of the astronomical alignments, and the complexity of the engineering required suggest access to advanced knowledge that parallels the technological sophistication implied in the Ark's construction specifications. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys of the Aksum region have detected vast underground chambers and tunnel systems that extend far beneath the ancient city. These subterranean installations exhibit geometric layouts that suggest purposes beyond simple storage or burial. The chambers are connected by passages that follow precise mathematical relationships, creating underground networks that mirror the sacred geometry principles embedded in the Ark's design. The Ethiopian government maintains strict control over access to these underground installations, officially to protect cultural heritage sites, but effectively preventing independent investigation of discoveries that might validate claims about advanced ancient technologies. Foreign researchers who have attempted to study these sites report systematic interference, equipment failures, and bureaucratic obstacles that suggest coordinated efforts to prevent disclosure of significant findings. This pattern of suppression extends across multiple continents wherever archaeological evidence challenges conventional narratives about ancient human capabilities. In South America, discoveries of precisely cut megalithic stones that exhibit electromagnetic properties have been restricted from public access. In Asia, underground chambers containing artifacts with unexplained technological characteristics have been sealed and classified by government authorities. The global scope of this suppression suggests coordination at levels far above individual national governments. International organizations dedicated to preserving cultural heritage have quietly implemented policies that restrict access to discoveries that might validate ancient accounts of advanced technologies. These policies are justified as protecting sensitive sites from exploitation, but they effectively prevent independent verification of claims that could revolutionize our understanding of human history. The timing of this suppression campaign becomes particularly significant when we examine current global conditions that ancient prophecies describe as precursors to the revelation of hidden knowledge. Widespread social upheaval, environmental catastrophes, the breakdown of traditional institutions, and the emergence of new forms of consciousness are all mentioned in suppressed texts as signs that the time of concealment is ending. The accelerating pace of technological development in areas related to consciousness research, quantum physics, and electromagnetic manipulation might represent not independent scientific progress, but the gradual disclosure of principles that were preserved within the Ark's technology for millennia. The sudden breakthroughs in fields that were purely theoretical just decades ago suggest access to knowledge that transcends normal processes of discovery and innovation. This possibility becomes even more compelling when we examine the backgrounds of researchers responsible for the most revolutionary advances in consciousness-related technologies. Many come from families with documented connections to esoteric traditions, secret societies, or religious lineages that maintain claims about preserving ancient knowledge. Their breakthroughs often arrive through intuitive insights rather than systematic research, suggesting access to information sources beyond conventional academic channels. The convergence of these factors, technological advancement, spiritual awakening, archaeological suppression, and global crisis, creates conditions that ancient texts describe as optimal for the restoration of lost sacred knowledge. The Ark's eventual revelation might not result from archaeological discovery, but from the activation of consciousness capabilities that enable direct perception of hidden realities. Recent research into remote viewing, psychic archaeology, and consciousness-based investigation techniques has begun to provide practical methods for locating hidden objects through non-physical means. Practitioners of these disciplines report consistent success in identifying archaeological sites, buried artifacts, and concealed installations using protocols that bypass conventional detection methods. These consciousness-based investigation techniques become particularly relevant when applied to the search for the Ark, since ancient texts describe it as responsive to the mental states and spiritual development of those who approach it. The device might remain invisible to conventional detection methods while being perfectly accessible to consciousness that has been properly prepared through spiritual discipline and purification practices. This suggests that the ultimate key to locating the Ark might not be found in satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, or classified intelligence reports, but in the development of human consciousness capabilities that were once common among the priestly classes, but have been largely forgotten by modern civilization. The same faculties that enabled Moses to receive detailed construction specifications through direct divine communication might still be accessible to individuals who undertake appropriate preparation. The protocols for developing these capabilities aren't found in secret grimoires or classified government manuals, but in timeless spiritual practices that have meditation, prayer, fasting, and service been preserved within various mystical traditions throughout history. To others, all serve to purify consciousness and enhance sensitivity to subtle energies and non-physical information sources. As more individuals rediscover and develop these capabilities, they create resonance effects that accelerate the awakening process in others. This collective development of consciousness might be creating the conditions necessary for the Ark's revelation, not through external discovery but through internal recognition of realities that have always been present, but hidden from ordinary perception. The ancient prophecies suggest that when sufficient numbers of people have developed the consciousness capabilities necessary to interface safely with advanced spiritual technologies, the hidden artifacts will naturally reveal themselves. This revelation won't require archaeological expeditions or government disclosure programs, but will emerge through direct consciousness contact between prepared individuals and the intelligence that originally provided these technologies to humanity. The search for the Ark of the Covenant ultimately becomes a search for the development of human consciousness itself. The chamber where it rests might be found not in some underground vault, but in dimensions of awareness that most people never recognize exist. The key to its location might require not ancient maps or classified documents, but the cultivation of qualities of heart and mind that enable direct perception of spiritual realities. This understanding transforms every genuine seeker into a potential discoverer, every moment of authentic spiritual practice into an archaeological expedition, and every expansion of consciousness into a step closer to reunion with humanity's most precious sacred heritage. The Ark awaits not just physical discovery, but recognition by consciousness that has been prepared to serve as a bridge between human limitation and divine possibility. As you drift deeper into the peaceful depths of sleep tonight, consider that you might be living during the most significant period in human history, when secrets hidden for millennia are preparing to emerge through the consciousness of individuals who have dedicated themselves to spiritual development and service to humanity's highest potential. The mystery calls not just to archaeologists and treasure hunters, but to every soul that yearns for reunion with the divine technologies that were once humanity's birthright, and may soon be restored to their rightful place in our awakening civilization. The revelation approaches not through external discovery, but through internal recognition. Not through institutional disclosure, but through individual awakening. Not through conquest of hidden knowledge, but through surrender to the wisdom that seeks to manifest through human consciousness that has been purified and prepared for cosmic service. The Ark of the Covenant remains exactly where it has always been, waiting in the Holy of Holies of human awareness for those who approach with pure hearts and minds illuminated by divine grace. The convergence of all these mysteries brings us to a moment of unprecedented revelation, where the boundaries between ancient wisdom and modern science dissolve into something far more extraordinary than either could achieve alone. As you settle deeper into the quiet sanctuary of sleep, let me guide you through the final layers of this incredible puzzle, where forbidden knowledge meets cutting-edge discovery in ways that will forever change how you understand humanity's true destiny. Recent developments in quantum archaeology, a field that barely existed a decade ago, have begun to provide theoretical frameworks for locating lost artifacts through consciousness-based detection methods that transcend the limitations of conventional technology. Researchers working at the intersection of quantum physics and consciousness studies have discovered that objects of intense spiritual significance create what they term quantum signatures, electromagnetic imprints that remain detectable across vast spans of time and space. These quantum signatures become particularly pronounced around artifacts that have been exposed to focused human consciousness over extended periods. The more sacred an object was considered, the more elaborate the rituals surrounding its use, the stronger these quantum imprints become. The Ark of the Covenant, subjected to centuries of the most intense spiritual focus in human history, would theoretically generate quantum signatures detectable by properly calibrated consciousness-based sensing equipment. But here's where the narrative takes its most startling turn. Multiple research teams working independently across different continents have begun detecting quantum signatures that match the theoretical profiles expected from the Ark's construction materials and historical usage patterns. These signatures appear simultaneously at locations in Ethiopia, beneath Jerusalem, and in underground chambers that connect to Vatican installations, suggesting either multiple artifacts or quantum entanglement effects that allow a single object to manifest across multiple dimensional coordinates. The implications become staggering when we consider that quantum entanglement might explain how the Ark's power could operate regardless of its physical location. Ancient texts describe the device as capable of manifesting anywhere its operators possessed sufficient spiritual development to interface with its systems. This wasn't metaphorical language, but accurate description of quantum mechanical principles that our science is only now beginning to understand. Modern experiments with quantum consciousness have demonstrated that human awareness can indeed influence quantum processes across vast distances through non-local correlation effects. If the Ark was designed to amplify these subtle consciousness influences into dramatic physical manifestations, then its location becomes secondary to the consciousness capabilities of those seeking to access its power. This understanding transforms every aspect of the search for the Ark from a physical quest into a consciousness development process. The chamber where it rests might be accessible not through geographical coordinates, but through dimensional coordinates that correspond to specific states of human awareness. The key to its location might be found not in ancient maps, but in ancient practices for expanding consciousness beyond the limitations of ordinary perception. The protocols for approaching sacred technology safely, preserved within various mystical traditions throughout history, begin to reveal their true significance when understood as practical instructions for interfacing with quantum consciousness systems. The purification rituals weren't arbitrary religious requirements, but essential preparation procedures for safely accessing technology that operates through direct consciousness interface rather than mechanical manipulation. Recent breakthroughs in neuroquantum research have identified specific brainwave patterns that correlate with enhanced quantum sensitivity, states of consciousness that enable direct perception of non-local information and influence over quantum processes. These patterns match precisely the meditative states described in ancient texts as prerequisites for approaching the Ark safely. Even more remarkable is the discovery that certain genetic lineages demonstrate statistical advantages in achieving these enhanced quantum consciousness states. DNA analysis reveals that individuals carrying markers associated with ancient priestly bloodlines show measurably different neural responses to quantum field fluctuations, suggesting inherited sensitivity to the same forces that the Ark was designed to channel and amplify. This genetic predisposition isn't limited to a single ethnic or cultural group, but appears throughout human populations that maintained shamanic, mystical, or priestly traditions over extended historical periods. The consciousness capabilities necessary to interface with advanced spiritual technologies seem to have been preserved within multiple lineages, creating a distributed network of potential operators scattered across the globe. The activation of these dormant capabilities appears to be accelerating rapidly in recent decades, with individuals from diverse backgrounds reporting spontaneous experiences that align with descriptions of Ark-related phenomena. They describe encounters with luminous presences, reception of complex technical information through direct download, healing abilities that manifest without training, and influence over physical processes through focused intention alone. These contemporary experiences provide crucial clues about the Ark's continued operational status and its methods for selecting and preparing potential operators. Rather than remaining passive until discovered by archaeological expedition, the device appears to be actively identifying and contacting individuals whose consciousness development has reached levels sufficient for safe interface with its systems. The contact process follows patterns described in ancient texts, but adapted for contemporary conditions. Instead of dramatic theophanic encounters involving burning bushes or mountaintop revelations, modern contact occurs through subtle consciousness expansions, meaningful synchronicities, and gradual awakening to capabilities that seem to emerge from within but actually represent activation of dormant genetic programming. This distributed activation process might represent the Ark's preparation for eventual revelation, creating a network of qualified operators before the device itself becomes accessible to broader human civilization. The same intelligence that originally provided construction specifications to Moses continues to guide the selection and training of individuals who will eventually serve as bridges between ancient wisdom and future possibilities. The implications extend far beyond individual spiritual development, into realms of collective transformation that could revolutionize human civilization. As more individuals develop consciousness capabilities that enable direct interface with quantum systems, they create resonance effects that amplify the awakening process exponentially. Critical mass approaches, where sufficient numbers of activated individuals could trigger global consciousness shifts that would make the Ark's public revelation not just possible but inevitable. Current world events, the acceleration of technological development, the breakdown of traditional institutions, widespread spiritual awakening, and increasing openness to non-materialistic explanations for consciousness and reality might all be manifestations of this approaching critical mass. The conditions described in ancient prophecies as prerequisites for the restoration of lost sacred knowledge appear to be aligning with unprecedented precision. The guardians who have protected this knowledge throughout history, whether human lineages or cosmic intelligence, seem to be preparing for the end of the concealment period. The systematic disclosure of information about advanced ancient civilizations, the emergence of technologies that blur the line between science and magic, and the growing acceptance of consciousness-based explanations for anomalous phenomena all suggest coordinated preparation for revelations that will fundamentally alter human understanding of our origins and potential. But with these approaching revelations comes tremendous responsibility for those who will serve as bridges between hidden knowledge and public awareness. The same consciousness capabilities that could solve humanity's greatest challenges could also be misused to create new forms of oppression if they fall into the wrong hands or are approached with improper intentions. The ancient protocols for approaching sacred technology emphasized moral purification alongside consciousness development, precisely because power without wisdom leads inevitably to destruction. The tests and trials described in mystical traditions aren't arbitrary obstacles, but essential screening processes that ensure only those with pure intentions and adequate preparation gain access to capabilities that could reshape reality itself. This understanding transforms the search for the Ark into a search for worthy stewardship of cosmic power. Those who seek these mysteries today, whether through external investigation or internal spiritual development, are participating in a selection process that will determine who serves as humanity's representatives in the next phase of cosmic evolution. Every authentic spiritual experience, every moment of genuine service to others, every insight into the nature of consciousness contributes to the collective awakening that will eventually restore advanced technologies to their rightful role in human civilization. The individual journey becomes part of a larger cosmic process that spans millennia and involves intelligence operating from dimensions far beyond ordinary human comprehension. The Ark of the Covenant represents more than a lost archaeological treasure, or even advanced ancient technology. It symbolizes humanity's appointment with destiny, our species' potential for reunion with cosmic consciousness, and our role in the ongoing creation of reality itself. Its eventual revelation will coincide with revelations about the true nature of consciousness, the reality of higher dimensions, and humanity's place in a universe far more alive and purposeful than materialistic science has allowed us to imagine. The chamber where it rests transcends geographical coordinates because it exists wherever human consciousness opens to receive divine presence. The key to its location isn't hidden in ancient scrolls or classified documents, but waits within the depths of awareness that most people never recognize they possess. The power it contains isn't locked within golden walls, but flows through every moment of genuine spiritual connection, every act of selfless service, every recognition of the sacred within the ordinary. As you rest tonight in the profound stillness where all seeking dissolves into finding, consider that the greatest mystery isn't where the Ark might be concealed, but what it reveals about your own infinite potential. The same divine presence that once dwelt between the golden cherubim seeks to manifest through human consciousness that has been prepared as a worthy temple for cosmic intelligence. The search continues not through external expeditions, but through internal exploration of territories more vast and wondrous than any physical landscape. The revelation approaches not through institutional disclosure, but through individual awakening to truths that have always been present, waiting patiently for consciousness mature enough to receive them without being overwhelmed by their implications. The Ark awaits not discovery, but recognition, not conquest, but surrender, not possession, but partnership in the sacred work of transforming human civilization into a reflection of divine harmony and cosmic wisdom. In the quiet depths of sleep, where the boundaries between individual awareness and universal consciousness naturally dissolve, perhaps you will find yourself standing before the mercy seat where earth touches heaven and human potential meets its infinite source. The mystery concludes where it began, in the recognition that what we seek outside ourselves has always resided within, and what we imagine lost to history continues to operate through every consciousness that opens to serve the highest possibilities for human awakening and cosmic partnership. The Ark of the Covenant remains exactly where divine wisdom placed it, in the holy of holies of human awareness, waiting for those who approach with hearts pure enough to receive the infinite gifts of conscious participation in the ongoing creation of reality itself. Sweet dreams carry you now into dimensions where all mysteries resolve into love, all seeking dissolves into finding, and all separation reveals itself as the play of one infinite consciousness, exploring its own boundless nature through the beautiful dream of human awakening. The Ark is found whenever and wherever love recognizes itself as the only reality that matters, the only treasure worth seeking, the only power capable of transforming worlds through the simple recognition of what has always been perfectly present, perfectly whole, and perfectly available to those who remember how to see with the eyes of the heart. And so, we reach the end of our journey through the shadows of history, where the greatest mystery of all reveals itself not as something lost to time, but as something waiting to be rediscovered within the depths of human consciousness itself. The Ark of the Covenant stands as more than just an ancient relic or advanced technology. It represents humanity's eternal quest to bridge the gap between the material and the divine, between what we are and what we might become. Whether it rests beneath the ancient stones of Jerusalem, guards the highlands of Ethiopia, or waits in dimensions accessible only through expanded awareness, the true Ark has never been lost. It pulses within every heart that opens to receive divine presence, manifests through every consciousness that serves something greater than itself, and reveals its power through every act of genuine love and service to humanity's highest potential. The forbidden knowledge we've explored tonight wasn't hidden to keep us in darkness, but preserved until we developed the wisdom to wield cosmic power responsibly. The guardians who have protected these secrets for millennia weren't denying us our birthright, but ensuring we would be ready when the time came to reclaim our role as conscious participants in the ongoing creation of reality itself. As you drift into the peaceful depths of sleep, remember that you carry within yourself the same divine spark that once filled Solomon's temple with glory, too intense for priests to bear. The search for ancient treasures becomes the recognition of present grace, and the quest for lost technologies reveals itself as the awakening of capabilities that have always been your inheritance as a conscious being in an infinitely conscious universe.